Chapter 10 of Dorado by Baroness Orczy. Read for LibriVox.org by Karen Savage in June 2007. Chapter 10. Shadows. The tension on her nerves relaxed. There was the inevitable reaction. Her knees were shaking under her, and she literally staggered into the room. But Armand was already near her, down on both his knees this time, his arms clasping the delicate form that swayed like the slender stems of narcissi in the breeze. "Oh, you must go out of Paris at once," she said through sobs which no longer would be kept back. "He'll return. I know that he will return, and you will not be safe until you are back in England." But he could not think of himself or of anything in the future. He had forgotten Heron, Paris, the world. He could think only of her. "I owe my life to you," he murmured. "Oh, how beautiful you are, how brave, how I love you." It seemed that he had always loved her, from the moment that first in his boyish heart he had set up an ideal to worship, and then last night in the box of the theatre. He had his back turned toward the stage, and was ready to go. Her voice had called him back. It had held him spellbound. Her voice, and also her eyes. He did not know then that it was love which then and there had enchained him. How foolish he had been! For now he knew that he had loved her with all his might, with all his soul, from the very instant that his eyes had rested upon her. He babbled along incoherently, in the intervals of covering her hands and the hem of her gown with kisses. He stooped right down to the ground and kissed the arch of her instep. He had become a devotee worshipping at the shrine of his saint, who had performed a great and wonderful miracle. Armand the idealist had found his ideal in a woman. That was the great miracle which the woman herself had performed for him. He found in her all that he had admired most, all that he had admired in the leader who hitherto had been the only personification of his ideal. But Jeanne possessed all those qualities which had roused his enthusiasm in the noble hero whom he revered: her pluck, her ingenuity, her calm devotion which had averted the threatened danger from him. What had he done that she should have risked her own sweet life for his sake? But Jeanne did not know. She could not tell. Her nerves were now somewhat unstrung, and the tears that always came so readily to her eyes flowed quite unchecked. She could not very well move, for he held her knees imprisoned in his arms, but she was quite content to remain like this, and to yield her hands to him, so that he might cover them with kisses. Indeed, she did not know at what precise moment love for him had been born in her heart. Last night, perhaps. She could not say, but when they parted she felt that she must see him again, and then to day. Perhaps it was the scent of the violets, they were so exquisitely sweet. Perhaps it was his enthusiasm and his talk about England. But when Heron came she knew that she must save Armand's life at all cost, that she would die if they dragged him away to prison. Thus these two children philosophised, trying to understand the mystery of the birth of love. But they were only children. They did not really understand. Passion was sweeping them off their feet, because a common danger had bound them irrevocably to one another. The womanly instinct to save and to protect had given the young girl strength to bear a difficult part, and now she loved him for the dangers from which she had rescued him, and he loved her because she had risked her life for him. The hours sped on. There was so much to say, so much that was exquisite to listen to. The shades of evening were gathering fast. The room, with its pale toned hangings and faded tapestries, was sinking into the arms of gloom. Aunt Marie was no doubt too terrified to stir out of her kitchen. She did not bring the lamps, but the darkness suited Armand's mood, and Jeanne was glad that the gloaming effectually hid the perpetual blush in her cheeks. In the evening air the dying flowers sent their heady fragrance around. Armand was intoxicated with the perfume of violets that clung to Jeanne's fingers, with the touch of her satin gown that brushed his cheek, with the murmur of her voice that quivered through her tears. No noise from the ugly outer world reached this secluded spot. In the tiny square outside a street lamp had been lighted, and its feeble rays came peeping in through the lace curtains at the window. They caught the dainty silhouette of the young girl, playing with the loose tendrils of her hair around her forehead, and outlining a thin band of light the contour of neck and shoulder, making the satin of her gown shimmer with an opalescent glow. Armand rose from his knees. Her eyes were calling to him, her lips were ready to yield. "Tu m'aimes?" he whispered, and like a tired child she sank upon his breast. He kissed her hair, her eyes, her lips. Her skin was fragrant as the flowers of spring, the tears on her cheeks glistened like morning dew. Aunt Marie came in at last, carrying the lamp. She found them sitting side by side like two children, hand in hand, mute with the eloquence which comes from boundless love. They were under a spell, forgetting even that they lived, knowing nothing except that they loved. The lamp broke the spell, and Aunt Marie's still trembling voice: "Oh, my dear, how did you manage to rid yourself of those brutes?" But she asked no other question, even when the lamp showed up quite clearly the glowing cheeks of Jeanne and the ardent eyes of Armand. In her heart, long since atrophied, there were a few memories, carefully put away in a secret cell, and those memories caused the old woman to understand. Neither Jeanne nor Armand noticed what she did. The spell had been broken, but the dream lingered on. They did not see Aunt Marie putting the room tidy and then quietly tiptoeing out by the door. But through the dream reality was struggling for recognition. After Armand had asked for the 100th time, "Tu m'aimes?" and Jeanne for the 100th time had replied mutely with her eyes, her fears for him suddenly returned. Something had awakened her from her trance. A heavy footstep mayhap in the street below, the distant roll of a drum, or only the clash of steel saucepans in Aunt Marie's kitchen. But suddenly Jeanne was alert, and with her alertness came terror for the beloved. "Your life," she said, for he had called her his life just then. "Your life, and I was forgetting that it is still in danger. Your dear, your precious life." "Doubly dear now," he replied, "since I owe it to you." "Then I pray you, I entreat you, guard it well for my sake. Make all haste to leave Paris. Oh, this I beg of you," she continued more earnestly, seeing the look of demur in his eyes. "Every hour you spend in it brings danger nearer to your door." "I could not leave Paris while you are here." "But I am safe here," she urged, "quite, quite safe, I assure you. I am only a poor actress, and the government takes no heed of us mimes. Men must be amused, even between the intervals of killing one another. Indeed, indeed, I should be far safer here now, waiting quietly for a while you make preparations to go. My hasty departure at this moment would bring disaster on us both." There was logic in what she said, and yet how could he leave her, now that he had found this perfect woman, this realisation of his highest ideals? How could he go and leave her in this awful Paris, with brutes like Heron forcing their hideous personality into her sacred presence, threatening that very life he would gladly give his own to keep inviolate? "Listen, sweetheart," he said after a while, when presently reason struggled back for first place in his mind. "Will you allow me to consult with my chief, with the Scarlet Pimpernel, who is in Paris at the present moment? I am under his orders. I could not leave France just now. My life, my entire person are at his disposal. I and my comrades are here under his orders, for a great undertaking which he has not yet unfolded to us, but which I firmly believe is framed for the rescue of the Dauphin from the Temple." She gave an involuntary exclamation of horror. "No, no," she said quickly and earnestly. "As far as you are concerned, Armand, that has now become an impossibility. Some one has betrayed you, and you are henceforth a marked man. I think that odious de Batz had a hand in Heron's visit of this afternoon. We succeeded in putting these spies off the scent, but only for a moment. Within a few hours, less perhaps, Heron will repent him of his carelessness. He'll come back. I know that he will come back. He may leave me personally alone, but he will be on your track. He'll drag you to the Conciergerie to report yourself, and there your true name and history are bound to come to light. If you succeed in evading him, he will still be on your track. If the Scarlet Pimpernel keeps you in Paris now, your death will be at his door." Her voice had become quite hard and trenchant as she said these last words. Womanlike, she was already prepared to hate the man whose mysterious personality she had hitherto admired, now that the life and safety of Armand appeared to depend on the will of that elusive hero. "You must not be afraid for me, Jeanne," he urged. "The Scarlet Pimpernel cares for all his followers. He would never allow me to run unnecessary risks." She was unconvinced, almost jealous now of his enthusiasm for that unknown man. Already she had taken full possession of Armand. She had purchased his life, and he had given her his love. She would share neither treasure with that nameless leader who held Armand's allegiance. "It is only for a little while, sweetheart," he reiterated again and again. "I could not anyhow leave Paris whilst I feel that you are here, maybe in danger. The thought would be horrible. I should go mad if I had to leave you." Then he talked again of England, of his life there, of the happiness and peace that were in store for them both. "We will go to England together," he whispered, "and there we will be happy together, you and I. We will have a tiny house among the Kentish hills, and its walls will be covered with honeysuckle and roses. At the back of the house there will be an orchard, and in May, when the fruit blossom is fading and soft spring breezes blow among the trees, showers of sweet scented petals will envelop us as we walk along, falling on us like fragrant snow. You will come, sweetheart, will you not?" "If you still wish it, Armand," she murmured. Still wish it! He would gladly go to morrow if she would come with him. But of course that could not be arranged. She had her contract to fulfil at the theatre, then there would be her house and furniture to dispose of, and there was Aunt Marie, but of course Aunt Marie would come too. She thought that she could get away some time before the spring, and he swore that he could not leave Paris until she came with him. It seemed a terrible deadlock, for she could not bear to think of him alone in those awful Paris streets, where she knew that spies would always be tracking him. She had no illusions as to the impression which she had made on Heron. She knew that it could only be a momentary one, and that Armand would henceforth be in daily, hourly danger. At last she promised him that she would take the advice of his chief. They would both be guided by what he said. Armand would confide in him to night, and if it could be arranged she would hurry on her preparations, and mayhap be ready to join him in a week. "In the meanwhile, that cruel man must not risk your dear life," she said. "Remember, Armand, your life belongs to me. Oh, I could hate him for the love you bear him." "Shh!" he said earnestly. "Dear heart, you must not speak like that of the man whom, next to your perfect self, I love most upon earth. You think of him more than of me. I shall scarce live until I know that you are safely out of Paris." Though it was horrible to part, yet it was best, perhaps, that he should go back to his lodgings now, in case Heron sent his spies back to her door, and since he meant to consult with his chief. She had a vague hope that if the mysterious hero was indeed the noble hearted man whom Armand represented him to be, surely he would take compassion on the anxiety of a sorrowing woman, and release the man she loved from bondage. This thought pleased her and gave her hope. She even urged Armand now to go. "When may I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "But it will be so dangerous to meet," she argued. "I must see you. I could not live through the day without seeing you. The theatre is the safest place. I could not wait till the evening. May I not come here?" "No, no. Heron's spies may be about." "Where then?" She thought it over for a moment. "At the stage door of the theatre at 1 o'clock," she said at last. "We shall have finished rehearsal. Slip into the guichet of the concierge. I will tell him to admit you, and send my dresser to meet you there. She will bring you along to my room, where we shall be undisturbed for at least half an hour." He had perforce to be content with that, though he would so much rather have seen her here again, where the faded tapestries and soft toned hangings made such a perfect background for her delicate charm. He had every intention of confiding in Blakeney, and of asking his help for getting Jeanne out of Paris as quickly as may be. Thus this perfect hour was passed, the most pure, the fullest of joy that these two young people were ever destined to know. Perhaps they felt within themselves the consciousness that their great love would rise anon to yet greater, fuller perfection when fate had crowned it with its halo of sorrow. Perhaps, too, it was that consciousness that gave to their kisses now the solemnity of a last farewell. End of chapter 10.